Beyond the West Asia war on land, air and sea, there is now a narrative war between Iran and the US that has taken the center stage. And the point of contention is whether or not talks to end the war are currently taking place. Well, US President Donald Trump has claimed there have been talks between the US and Iran over the past day in which the two sides had major points of agreement, appearing to avert a potential severe escalation of the conflict. He said Tehran made the call and that talks are happening with a respected leader who he did not name.
So they called. I didn't call. They called. They want to make a deal. And we are very willing to make a deal. It's got to be a good deal. And it's got to be no more wars, no more nuclear weapons. They're not going to have nuclear weapons anymore. They're agreeing to that. Any of that stuff, there's no deal.
When Trump first made a statement on Truth Social, Iranian media quoted sources who dismissed any information of direct or indirect talks taking place. Trump blamed it on Iran's broken and battered communications.
Well, they're going to have to get themselves better public relations people. We have had very, very strong talks. We'll see where they lead. We have major points of agreement. I would say almost all points of agreement. Perhaps that hasn't been conveyed. The communication, as you know, has been blown to pieces. They're unable to talk to each other.
Trump's claimed invited reactions from several Iranian officials as well as their embassies. All in unison denied Trump's claims. Iranian state media quoted the country's foreign ministry spokesperson who said they have had no talks with US. Then the spokesperson for the Iranian Parliament's National Security and Foreign Policy Committee, Ibrahim Rezai, put out a statement. He said that Trump was either lying or, quote, talking nonsense. One of the most senior Iranian officials to deny Trump's claims in the country's parliament speaker, Mohammad Baghir Ghalibaf. Well, he said no negotiations have been held with the US and he called Trump's assertions fake news meant to manipulate financial and oil markets. Interestingly, the US media outlet Axios has identified Ghalibaf as the official who was talking to Trump's envoy, citing an unnamed Israeli official. Reports also said that US negotiators Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner may meet an Iranian delegation for talks in Pakistan as soon as this week, with Vice President J.D. Vance possibly joining. Well, for more on this, we are being joined live by Professor James A. Russell from Monterey, California. He's an associate professor in the Department of National Security Affairs at the Naval Postgraduate School. Well, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Well, first up, is this narrative around talks essentially aimed at calming global markets, especially oil, and is it working according to you?
Of course, one hopes that in situations like this, that the antagonists in these kinds of wars are in fact having back-channel communications and are actually engaged in diplomacy to try to bring a halt to hostilities. In this particular case, and I am ashamed to say this as an American, President Trump has no credibility in any of these matters. He has repeatedly shown that he makes things up on the spur of the moment. He times his announcements to coincide with the market's opening. I wish I could say I thought this was all truthful and that the United States and Iran were actually in discussions, serious discussions over how to end this conflict, but I have doubts about it.
Right, and how do you read Trump's claims of major points of agreement? Is this credible or strategic messaging? I know that you've just said that he might not be credible per se, but what do you actually think about that?
So I get back to the comments by the Omani foreign minister, who this was in the talks that the Omanis were hosting in Muscat between Jared Kushner, Witkoff, and the Iranian representatives, in which, and the British observer confirmed this, that it appeared as if there was some kind of the basis for an agreement on a wide variety of different issues. And the point of that exercise, it seems to me, was that the United States was never interested in saying yes to an agreement with the Iranians. And it had, of course, the Israelis who were desperately afraid that Trump would say yes. So the question has to be asked, well, what has changed? And of course, what's changed is that, in my view, Iran is in the driver's seat in the war. Trump has lost control of the war. He seems to think that sort of incremental escalation will result in the Iranians crying uncle and basically capitulating. And it's obvious that that is not going to happen. The Iranians have, if they haven't closed the strait, they've certainly closed it to America and American allies. There's some reporting that they are interested in charging fees now and are establishing themselves as kind of the toll collector in the Strait of Hormuz, which is of course an interesting kind of development. We also have reports of American Marine Expeditionary Units that are en route to the region. So there are all these, sort of balls in the air, things in play right now. But I think it's obvious that there is the basis for some kind of agreement, but the United States has to be prepared to say yes, and which is to say to address the genuine Iranian grievances. And to date, it's shown no interest in addressing these grievances in a concrete way.
Right, and you just mentioned that Iran is on the driver's seat. Then why exactly is Iran outright denying talks? We are pure signaling, or does it reflect deeper internal divisions? How would you assess that?
I frankly, again, based on the previous interactions between these antagonists, Iran is by far the more credible interlocutor, as much as it pains me to sort of say this. They were the ones who were seriously negotiating the last time around. They were prepared to make concessions. They were prepared to address the nuclear program. And the result of the war has been that the issues now on the table for discussion go far beyond the nuclear program. The Iranians need security guarantees that there's not going to be another eruption of hostilities in several months. The Iranians now want, as they should want, reparations from the Americans and the Israelis for all the destruction that they've wrought. There are all of these things now in play, which are, of course, much more complicated now that the war has been going on, as opposed to when the participants met in Muscat before the war started. So it's all become much more complicated, and I would also respectfully suggest that this is something that's not going to be resolved by Trump and his Zionist realtor advisors. Kushner, and Witkoff, none of whom are experienced diplomats, professional diplomats. These complicated issues are going to take time to sort out. And I don't see any commitment on the part of the Trump administration, or the expertise, frankly, in the Trump administration to try to bring something like this, a complicated series of issues, to any kind of successful closure, particularly not in the space of a couple of days.
Right, and do you think these claims and denials that is like going on right now? Trump said about that 5 days, and we are going to get Iran negotiate with Iran. These claims and denials, how would they impact military decision making on the ground right now?
This is a great question, and the question is, the answer is, for the Israelis, I think it's pretty clear. The Israelis will take the time that has been, quote unquote, afforded to them by this deadline that Trump has cited. They're going to keep on doing what they've doing, which is, again, this Israeli way of war, which is to blow up civilian infrastructure, cause as much damage as they possibly can, create chaos, try to annihilate Iranian power. Whereas the United States, of course, doesn't have these kinds of cogent, sort of objectives. It's been unclear all along what the military objectives were by the Americans. And we've seen this series of statements by Trump about why the United States was doing this, when we all know, of course, or the evidence strongly suggests that it was the Israelis that dragged the United States into this. So the answer to your question is that it's unclear. Trump has indicated a willingness to attack the Iranian power infrastructure. And the fact of the matter is, we've talked about targets here in the thousands, numbering in the thousands. I strongly suspect that the United States and the Israelis have been battering the infrastructure. And of course, this has led to Iranian retaliation. And of course, it's a mistake to assume, and again, I think this has been a prominent part of these interactions, that the United States seems to think that if it somehow attacks harder and blows more things up, that it's going to change the Iranian position. And I can tell you that if Trump tries to somehow escalate and attack the power grid, which he has not attacked so far, the Iranians are going to respond in kind. And Trump has and his Secretary of Defense have claimed that the Iranian missile force is severely reduced and degraded. And this is not true. It's nonsense. The Iranians have been firing barrages of missiles every night across the region that America and the Gulf states and the Israelis, they are prepared and have been prepared for a long war. So getting back to your sort of question about this has always been unclear, which is to say, what is the relationship of military operations to actual achievable political objectives? And none of this has been defined, at least for me, and I think for much of the international community.